The whole world, especially social media, makes you think you should be better, do more, be more, have more, and then you'll be happy. But what if this approach is wrong? In my experience, most self-improvement content we consume is just mental masturbation. It feels good in the moment, creates the illusion of progress, but rarely leads to meaningful change. Think about it. How many productivity books have you read while procrastinating? How many workout videos have you watched while sitting on your couch? How many morning routine videos have you consumed before hitting snooze for the 5th time? Self-improvement is masturbation, says Tyler Durden in Fight Club. This provocative statement hits at something profoundly true. We're caught in an endless loop of consuming content about improving ourselves without actually improving. And there's a reason for this, several reasons, actually, rooted in our neurology, psychology, and the culture we live in. The average American spends about 50 minutes per day consuming self-improvement content. That's over 300 hours per year. Yet research from the University of Scranton suggests that 92% of people fail to achieve their goals. The global self-improvement industry is worth over $41 billion, growing at about 6% annually. We're buying more books, courses, and apps than ever before, yet psychological well-being metrics aren't improving at the same rate. Why this massive gap between consumption and transformation? That's what we're going to explore today. I'm not here to tell you to stop trying to improve. I'm here to show you why so much of what we call self-improvement is actually keeping us stuck, and what we can do about it. Let's start by understanding what's happening in your brain when you consume improvement content. The neuroscience behind self-improvement addiction is fascinating. When you watch a video about productivity or read a book about success, your brain releases dopamine, not because you've accomplished anything, but because your brain anticipates future rewards. This is what neuroscientists call anticipatory pleasure, and it's incredibly powerful. A 2016 study from the University of Chicago found that anticipation of rewards activates the same neural pathways as actually receiving those rewards. When you consume self-improvement content, you're essentially getting the neurological satisfaction of achievement without doing the work. Dr. Robert Sapolsky, a neurobiologist at Stanford, explains it this way: dopamine is not about pleasure, it's about the anticipation of pleasure. It's about the pursuit of happiness rather than happiness itself. This explains why we can feel so good after watching a motivational video or reading a chapter of a self-help book. Our brain is flooded with dopamine from anticipating how great our life will be once we implement these ideas. But here's the catch. This neurological satisfaction often reduces our motivation to actually take action. Why? Because your brain has already received its reward. The anticipatory pleasure has been fulfilled. Research from the University of California shows that publicly stating your goals and receiving social acknowledgement for them can create a premature sense of completeness, reducing the likelihood you'll actually do the work. Think of it like this. Imagine two towers. One represents your current life, and the other represents your ideal life. The self-improvement content you consume creates the imaginary bridge between these towers. You can see the path. You can imagine walking across it. You can even feel the emotions of arriving at the other side. But this imaginary bridge often prevents you from building the real bridge, which requires hard work, discomfort, and consistent action. This dopamine-driven cycle creates what psychologists call the planning fallacy, our tendency to underestimate the time needed to complete future tasks. A 2003 study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people typically underestimate project completion times by 40 to 60%. When you're high on dopamine from imagining your future success, you drastically underestimate the challenges you'll face. But dopamine isn't the only neurochemical at play here. Consuming improvement content also activates your brain's serotonin pathways. creating feelings of status and significance. When you learn about productivity systems or success principles, you begin to develop what psychologists call illusory superiority, the feeling that you now possess special knowledge that others don't have. Yet, knowledge isn't action. Knowing how to do push-ups doesn't strengthen your muscles. Knowing about nutrition doesn't make you healthy. Knowing productivity principles doesn't make you productive. This gap between knowing and doing is where most of us get stuck, and it's precisely what makes self-improvement content so insidious. It can make you feel like you're making progress when you're just spinning your wheels. The most damaging aspect of this neurological trap is how it reinforces itself. Each time you consume improvement content without taking meaningful action, you strengthen neural pathways that associate learning with accomplishment. Over time, your brain becomes conditioned to seek the easy dopamine hit of consumption rather than the harder but more fulfilling rewards of actual implementation. But this doesn't explain the whole picture. There's something deeper happening psychologically that keeps us trapped in this cycle. Let's dig into the hidden psychology of avoidance that powers our self-improvement addiction. At its core, consuming improvement content often serves as a sophisticated form of avoidance behavior, what psychologists call productive procrastination. It feels productive, you're learning, but it's actually helping you avoid the discomfort of real change. Dr. Piers Steel, a leading researcher on procrastination at the University of Calgary, found that we're most likely to procrastinate on tasks that are challenging, unpleasant, or ambiguous, even if these tasks are important to us. What makes self-improvement consumption so perfect for avoidance is that it creates the illusion of progress toward your goals while allowing you to sidestep the difficult actions needed for real change. Think about it. Let's say you want to start a business. Reading books about entrepreneurship feels productive. Watching videos about business strategies feels like research. Taking notes on success principles feels like preparation. All of these activities protect your ego from the possibility of failure that comes with actually starting the business. Stephen Pressfield calls this phenomenon resistance in his book, The War of Art. He writes, "Resistance is experienced as fear. The degree of fear equates to the strength of resistance. Therefore, the more fear we feel about a specific enterprise, the more certain we can be that that enterprise is important to us and to the growth of our soul." The activities that would most transform your life are precisely the ones you're most likely to avoid, and self-improvement content gives you the perfect excuse. After all, you're preparing, right? A study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that consumers often choose products that signal their identity aspirations rather than their actual identities. Similarly, we often consume improvement content that aligns with who we aspire to be, rather than addressing who we actually are. The consumption itself becomes a substitute for transformation. Psychologists call this symbolic self-completion, the tendency to use symbolic activities, like reading about fitness, to satisfy goals that actually require physical activities, like exercising. A study from New York University found that simply thinking about the concept of achievement can reduce actual achievement-oriented behavior by creating a sense of partial goal fulfillment. Here's where things get even more fascinating. Research from Duke University suggests that approximately 45% of our daily behaviors are habitual, performed automatically in response to contextual cues. This means that real transformation requires changing your environment and habits, not just consuming information. Yet information consumption itself becomes a habit. A study from the University of Southern California found that we check our phones an average of 58 times per day, with about 30% of these checks occurring within 10 minutes of the previous check. If you've developed a habit of consuming improvement content during your downtime, this habit itself may be preventing you from developing the habits that would actually improve your life. Let's go deeper. Many of us use self-improvement consumption to avoid facing uncomfortable truths about ourselves or our lives. As Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The real work of transformation often involves facing our shadows, our weaknesses, fears, and limitations. Reading another book about success is much easier than confronting why we're afraid to succeed. This is what Nietzsche called going under, the willingness to descend into the uncomfortable depths of ourselves to enable real transformation. But as he noted, most people avoid this descent at all costs, preferring the comfortable illusion of progress. In his words, "The greatest danger that always hovered near us was the mind, the spirit becoming old and weary. Hence all the strictures that made our senses wild and our taste restless and evil, like a fountain of renewal." Following your heart often means facing precisely what you've been avoiding. It means having the difficult conversation you've been postponing, leaving the relationship that no longer serves you, starting the project you've been afraid to begin. No amount of self-improvement content consumption can substitute for these acts of courage. But there's another factor at play here, one that's bigger than our individual psychology. There's an entire cultural infrastructure designed to keep us consuming rather than implementing. The cultural infrastructure supporting mental masturbation is vast and sophisticated. We're living in what philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls the achievement society, a social order dominated by the imperative to achieve, optimize, and improve. This creates the perfect conditions for endless improvement content consumption. The self-improvement industry isn't just big, it's strategically designed to create dependence rather than transformation. A 2018 market analysis revealed that the average self-help consumer buys 5 to 6 books per year, but only finishes about 30% of them. This isn't an accident, it's a business model. Think about it. If a self-help book or course actually solved your problems permanently, you wouldn't need to buy more. So there's a built-in incentive for improvement content to provide temporary inspiration rather than lasting transformation. As marketing professor Scott Galloway puts it, the most profitable customer is the one who comes back. Social media algorithms amplify this effect dramatically. These platforms are engineered to maximize engagement, not improvement. A study from the University of Pennsylvania found that social media platforms are specifically designed to trigger dopamine releases through variable reward schedules, the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. When you consume improvement content on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok, the algorithms notice and feed you more of the same. Soon, your feed is filled with productivity hacks, morning routines, and success principles. The more you watch, the more the algorithm learns that this content keeps you engaged, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of consumption without implementation. The fitness industry provides a perfect case study of this phenomenon. According to market research, Americans spend over $30 billion annually on gym memberships, yet 67% of these memberships go unused. Meanwhile, fitness influencers generate billions of views showing optimal workout routines and diet plans. The gap between consumption and implementation is where profits are made. The productivity space operates similarly. There are over 17,000 books on productivity available on Amazon. Popular productivity apps collectively have hundreds of millions of users. Yet a 2020 Gallup poll found that worker productivity hasn't substantially increased despite this explosion of productivity content. We're consuming more productivity advice than ever while becoming only marginally more productive. This creates what sociologists call a collective fiction, a shared belief system that serves particular interests. In this case, the fiction is that consuming more improvement content will eventually lead to transformation. This fiction serves the interests of content creators and platforms, not necessarily the consumers. The rise of what some call toxic productivity, the belief that you should always be optimizing and improving, has created a cultural environment where consumption of improvement content itself becomes a status signal. When you share that you're reading the latest productivity bestseller or listening to an entrepreneurship podcast, you signal your commitment to growth without having to demonstrate actual results. Parasocial relationships with improvement gurus further complicate this dynamic. A study from the University of Michigan found that repeated exposure to media personalities creates one-sided relationships where viewers feel they know and trust these figures. This trust makes us more likely to consume their content uncritically and less likely to question whether their advice works for our specific situation. Most improvement content also lacks contextual specificity. It's designed to apply to everyone, which means it truly works for almost no one. Your life situation, personality, resources, and challenges are unique. Generic advice rarely addresses the specific obstacles preventing you from changing. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of this cultural infrastructure is how it shifts responsibility entirely onto the individual. If you're not improving despite consuming all this content, the messaging suggests it's because you're not trying hard enough, not because the content itself might be ineffective, or the systems you're operating within might be flawed. So if consumption isn't the answer, what is? How do we move from knowledge accumulation to actual transformation? Moving from consumption to transformation requires a fundamental shift in approach. Rather than focusing on acquiring more information, we need to focus on implementing what we already know, even if that implementation is imperfect. Research on effective behavior change provides clear guidance here. A 2009 study published in the European Journal of Social Psychology found that it takes an average of 66 days to form a new habit, with a range from 18 to 254 days depending on the person and the behavior. This suggests that transformation requires sustained effort over time, not the quick fixes promised by most improvement content. Psychologist Anders Ericsson's research on expertise development introduced the concept of deliberate practice, focused, challenging practice with immediate feedback. This is fundamentally different from passive consumption. While consuming a video about playing piano might take 10 minutes, deliberate practice requires hours of focused attention and embracing the discomfort of making mistakes. Implementation science research shows that successful behavior change typically involves several key elements: clear, specific goals, environmental design that facilitates the desired behavior, accountability systems, and regular feedback loops. Notice that none of these involve consuming more content. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, emphasizes the concept of identity-based habits over outcome-based goals. Instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, focus on who you want to become. This shift from "I want to write a book," outcome-based, to "I am a writer," identity-based, changes how you approach implementation. This connects directly to what Nietzsche called downgoing, the willingness to shed your current identity and face discomfort for the sake of becoming something new. Real transformation isn't about adding more information to your current self. It's about becoming a different self entirely. The concept of the minimum effective dose is particularly relevant here. In medicine, this refers to the smallest dose that will produce the desired outcome. Applied to improvement, it means identifying the smallest amount of information you need to begin implementation. For most goals, you already know enough to start. You just haven't started. A study from the University of California found that people who implemented a simple plan, known as implementation intentions, were 91% more likely to achieve their goals than those who merely set goals without specific implementation plans. The formula is simple. When situation X arises, I will perform response Y. Environmental design often matters more than willpower. A study published in the journal Health Psychology found that people with lower self-control were actually more successful at achieving health goals when they focused on changing their environment rather than strengthening their willpower. This might mean removing social media apps from your phone, preparing your workout clothes the night before, or setting up automatic savings transfers. B.J. Fogg, founder of the Behavior Design Lab at Stanford University, emphasizes the importance of starting with tiny habits that require minimal motivation. His research shows that success with small behaviors creates momentum for larger changes. Instead of trying to implement an entire productivity system, start by closing a single tab when you finish with it. The key insight here is that transformation comes from consistently taking small actions, not from consuming more content. As author Marie Forleo puts it, clarity comes from engagement, not thought. You discover what works for you by doing, not by consuming more information about doing. This doesn't mean all consumption is bad. Strategic, intentional learning can be valuable, but the ratio matters. For every hour you spend consuming improvement content, you should spend at least 3 hours implementing what you've learned. Most people have this ratio backward. So how do we rebuild a healthy relationship with improvement? Rebuilding a healthy relationship with improvement begins with an honest assessment. Take a moment now to estimate how much time you spend consuming improvement content compared to implementing it. For most people, this ratio is heavily skewed toward consumption. The first step toward change is implementing an information diet, intentionally limiting your consumption of improvement content. Research from the University of California suggests that information overload decreases our ability to make decisions and take action. By consuming less, you create space for implementation. Try this experiment. For the next 30 days, commit to consuming 0 new improvement content. No books, articles, videos, or podcasts about how to improve your life. Instead, focus exclusively on implementing what you already know. You'll likely discover that knowledge was never your limiting factor. Psychology professor Gabriele Oettingen's research introduced a technique called mental contrasting, vividly imagining your desired future while also acknowledging the obstacles you'll face. This realistic approach to improvement is far more effective than the purely positive visualization promoted by many self-help gurus. Her WHOOP framework, Wish Outcome Obstacle Plan, has been shown in multiple studies to increase goal achievement by forcing you to confront the specific challenges you'll face. This contrasts sharply with the just stay positive messaging of much improvement content. Reflective practice, the systematic examination of your own experiences, offers another powerful alternative to endless consumption. Research from Harvard Business School found that employees who spent 15 minutes at the end of the day reflecting on lessons learned performed 23% better than those who didn't. Instead of seeking more information, extract deeper insights from your own experiences. Values clarification exercises can help you distinguish between externally imposed improvement goals and what truly matters to you. Psychologist Stephen Hayes, founder of Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, emphasizes that meaningful change must be aligned with your core values, not societal expectations or comparisons to others. This connects to what the philosopher Charles Taylor calls strong evaluation, making choices based on what kind of person you want to be, not just what you want to have or achieve. True transformation is ultimately about becoming more aligned with your deepest values, not accumulating more achievements or optimizing more aspects of your life. Research on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation consistently shows that changes driven by internal values and satisfaction are more sustainable than those driven by external rewards or pressure. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that intrinsically motivated behaviors persisted an average of 60% longer than extrinsically motivated ones. Creating implementation accountability is also crucial. A study from the American Society of Training and Development found that having a specific accountability appointment with someone increases the likelihood of completing a goal by 95%. This is why working with a coach, joining an accountability group, or even just telling a friend about your implementation intentions can dramatically increase follow-through. The concept of just-in-time learning offers a healthier approach to improvement. Instead of consuming content in case you might need it someday, seek specific information only when you've encountered an actual obstacle in your implementation. This ensures that what you learn is immediately applicable and motivated by real needs rather than hypothetical scenarios. Let me share a personal example of breaking free from this cycle. For years, I was addicted to productivity content. I had read dozens of books, tried every app and system, and could lecture for hours about optimal workflows. Yet, my actual productivity wasn't exceptional. I was what some call a productivity tourist, visiting the land of productivity without actually living there. My turning point came when I imposed a 6-month ban on all productivity content. No books, articles, videos, or podcasts about how to be more productive. Instead, I committed to implementing just 3 basic principles I already knew. Time blocking my calendar, using the Pomodoro technique for focused work, and doing a weekly review. The results were transformative, not because these techniques were revolutionary, they weren't, but because I was actually implementing them consistently instead of endlessly searching for better ones. My productivity increased substantially, and more importantly, I broke free from the cycle of consumption without implementation. I discovered that the limitation was never knowledge. It was the courage to face the discomfort of implementation. As Nietzsche would say, I needed to go under, to face the fear and resistance that had been keeping me stuck in consumption mode. What's fascinating is that once I shifted to implementation, I discovered problems that no book or course had prepared me for. The messy, context-specific challenges that only emerge when you're actually doing the work. These challenges couldn't be solved by consuming more content. They required experimentation, adjustment, and persistence. This shift from consumption to implementation isn't easy. There's a withdrawal period when you stop getting those dopamine hits from new content. You have to face the discomfort of not knowing if your implementation will work. You have to confront the possibility of failure without the safety net of, I just need to learn more first. But on the other side of this discomfort is actual transformation. Not the theoretical transformation promised by improvement content, but real, lived change. And this transformation brings a deeper satisfaction than consumption ever could. So where does this leave us? Self-improvement isn't inherently bad. The desire to grow and become better is fundamentally human. The problem arises when consumption becomes a substitute for action, when we mistake learning for transformation. The path forward isn't abandoning the desire to improve, it's shifting how we approach improvement. Focus on implementing what you already know rather than accumulating more knowledge. Embrace the discomfort of action over the comfort of consumption. Build systems that make implementation easier than avoidance. Remember that real transformation often requires going under, facing the fears, limitations, and vulnerabilities you've been avoiding. This descent isn't pleasant, but it's necessary for genuine growth. As Nietzsche put it, what is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. If you've been caught in the cycle of mental masturbation, consuming improvement content without implementing it, know that you're not alone. The systems we operate within are designed to keep you consuming rather than implementing. Breaking free requires intentional effort and courage. Start by taking an improvement inventory. What do you already know that you're not implementing? What specific actions have you been avoiding? What small step could you take today toward implementation rather than consumption? The beauty of shifting from consumption to implementation is that it's accessible to everyone. You don't need more information or resources. You just need to start acting on what you already know, however imperfectly. I've created a free implementation protocol guide that walks you through the exact system I used to break free from improvement addiction and start taking consistent action. You can download it using the link in the description. For those who want more direct support, I'm working with a small group of committed individuals in my Implementation Accelerator program. This isn't about learning more techniques. It's about implementing what you already know with accountability and guidance. If that interests you, there's a link to apply in the description. Remember, life responds to courage most of all. The courage to act despite uncertainty, to implement despite imperfection, to face the discomfort of change rather than hiding in the comfort of consumption. The path to transformation isn't paved with more knowledge, it's paved with consistent, courageous action. True wisdom isn't knowing what to do, it's doing what you know.